Well, welcome everyone to Resource Roundtable. Resource Roundtable is an ongoing event every third Thursday of the month, hosted by EDC Team Jefferson. And it's a place where we invite one or more guests to come and introduce themselves and their services to the people of Jefferson County.
So a little local flavor for our guys. I think this is an image from some teamwork that was being done on the sound experience adventurous out in the bay here when she happens to be here and get work done. So here I am, Tina and Bob, and we're a small group, so we can just have this be a back and forth chat about and interject whenever you like, and we can just have it be a casual conversation that serves in this instance. So just defining the budget, we're thinking in form of a strategic planning and thinking strategically that helps then create that manifestation of your organization's plan for the year. And we translate it to dollars and cents. It's going to tell that story of your organization. Whatever the mission is, whatever you invest in is what your values are. So working with different groups, you're able to, as a new person, come in and take a look and say, well, the majority of this is labor, the majority of this is whatever it is, for your organization. And then it just gets you thinking about how and why, and if whatever is being invested is enough or balanced or any of that. So, and it's representing what your organization has determined to be the focus for the next year or years. Lately, I've been getting into what about a 2-year budget? And you're kind of putting in that same effort right at the same time, and then maybe doing that little bit of a stretch and a reach. And I just find that you start thinking that way, you start planning that way, you start making decisions that way because you've got that next year budget already a little bit cast. And of course you recast it when you start the new year, but it's kind of a neat way to have that progress. So as you know, we're running businesses and it's really easy to get into tunnel vision, and we're just doing the thing after the thing that's in front of us. And so it's very easy to not do a budget for our own selves. Our organization gets involved with budgets because primarily because we've got a lot of nonprofits that we work with, and those groups do budgets. They're very clear that they need to do that. They've got boards of directors who say, hey, it's my fiduciary responsibility. I've got to be sure to be able to make sure that that is going to work. But for-profit businesses, nobody is requiring that of them. It's for themselves and for their own planning. And so often it just gets put to the back burner, and then it doesn't necessarily. I was trying to find a statistic of how many for-profit businesses actually do budget. And one was really encouraging, and it was like 61%. And then there was another one that basically had the reverse statistic that said 61% don't, or over 50% don't. And in my experience, it's a pretty low number of who actually budgets if they don't feel like they have to budget. I talked to a local CPA house here, of course, as chit chat at a party, and I'm talking about work. And I asked, what percentage would you say of your for-profits actually budget? And he said, oh, I think about 3%. And I said, wow, that's really low. And he says, yeah. And I said, of your for-profit businesses, which are the most lucrative businesses, who are doing the best? And he says, it's those 3%, so that makes sense. If you've got your eye on the ball, it's all going to help you. So why do we do it? We're going to ensure resource availability, help us set and report on our own internal goals. If we've got a team things that we want to incorporate, benefits or bonuses or different things, you know, to be able to incorporate that into the team. How do we get that on paper and start to pencil it out? Helps us prioritize whatever projects we've got going on that are our internal projects. Maybe it leads to financing opportunities and provides a pivotal plan. So if we know what's coming down the pike, we can make a tweak, do something a little bit different. And so what do we want to do? What do we want to know when we do that? We want to know if the organization's healthy. Is it sustainable? Will it run out of cash, or when will it run out of cash? And in your group, what do you know what's missing for that group? Maybe you're providing a set of reports that you're going through some motion, but maybe those reports are not delivering measures that are going to be useful for you, markers, you know, like if you've got a particular dashboard report that is giving you some metrics that give you a little bit more insight. And you want to know what your short-term needs and what your long-term needs are. Is there anything else you guys can think of? What else do you want to know?
No. Well, one of the questions I had on the organizations that do budget, do they tend to be the larger ones? Or is it all across the board?
I think it's really all across the board. I mean, I don't work with really large organizations. I mean, mine are maybe more like $3 or $5 million. You know, those are kind of the bigger size that we work with. And so certainly that size, well, let's see, for-profits. That size doesn't necessarily in for-profits, and usually it just has to do, what I've found with the ones that I'm working with, has to do with the people around the table who are just more deliberate, and so typically they're smaller budgets of the ones that do budget. But you know, it's been a neat thing because you kind of get that rhythm in there, and they're able to deliver with some concreteness those goals, if it's to build reserve, if it's to have a particular net, or if it's to have a particular gross income, whatever it is. It's kind of been a neat thing to say, well, here it is, and this is how we're going to get it because we're paying attention and we're focusing on it. So the ones that have used it, and then I guess I do have another 3 million that is doing a budget. They transitioned over from somebody who was helping them do some CFO, but was just doing kind of cash flow, which was needed, but I feel like you need both. Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
it just depends on how, yeah. And for people who are thinking that they want to transition out of the business. And so they want to get their ducks in a row, and they want to have things look a particular way and make sure that they're able to demonstrate something so that when they are ready to sell the business or hand it off. Yeah, Cindy. Oh, you're on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There's an implied or an implicit break-even point, but not everybody, you know, in their cash flow actually knows what their break-even point is until they're running out of cash. So it's always good idea to know that as you go in, and also break-even points at various levels of production, because people can run up underneath a stair step of expenses when they were profitable in one time frame, and then when they expand, they're suddenly unprofitable. So the break even at various levels of expansion, I think, is important in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at barriers of effective communication, distracted by details. I think sometimes the money part of it, the reporting part of it, some of that, you know, a lot of businesses are set up where they're they're used to delivering the service or the product or that, and then that's how they became the owner. And so maybe some of the, wearing all of the hats, maybe they're not as equipped to do all of that. So distracted by details, the inconsistent use of the reporting, unfamiliar with it, not having a narrative of what is going on. Kind of a little bit sometimes the ostrich in the sand, where I don't know, I'm afraid if I look at this too closely, it means that I'm not going to be able to do this for that it's not sustainable. So let's see. So it can be simpler. You can get your formatting for your reporting, get some condensed reporting in, and so that you zero in on what's important. You standardize, you break it into meaningful ways, you get those metrics, and create training opportunities. Recently, a group of ours had one person who had the burden of the entire budget, and because they were and I'd been trying to get them to have, just have different team members own a part of that budget so that they can help you run that part of the business as well, and be thinking, and it's not just one person. And so they started that process this year to say, okay, well, let's incorporate that, because you just have the help, I guess, to be able to have a second set of eyes looking at it. Ultimately, whoever is making the decision to make it all balanced, but at least you get some different perspective, and you can get somebody, and you can get help, and recognizing that we're not all accountants. And to me, that budget, your financials are telling a story, and if you're being consistent and mindful about how you're setting up, it becomes easier and easier to be able to see that. So we take it one step at a time. We get the numbers right, we analyze, we make the plan, and then of course manage the reality. And so we're looking at accurate, consistent. Is the whole team on board? Is everyone speaking the same language and budgeting or coding to where they budgeted, if they are in that part of the process? And then really looking at how much is too much information. You can track information to the nth and the nth degree, but at some point maybe it gets to be overwhelming to look at that, and it kind of gets in your way. So, I think that's a balance to be able to take a look at it. I think having the information, typically everybody I'm really working with is on QuickBooks. I don't think I've had a rare one or two that have been on something different. And so there's lots of flexibility there to have the detail, but also not have a corresponding account number for every bit of detail that you have, and you can still get that breakout if you're looking at it. So, and what should we be tracking? What the fixed costs, variable costs, cash, every group is going to be a little bit different depending on where they are and what their business needs are. If they've got a front load, a bunch of materials, or if they've got their contracts in place to be able to say, well, no, actually, I'm not going to be the bank. I'm not going to front load the materials and bill you at the end of the project. I'm going to ask for deposits. You're going to run your business in a way that helps you not be the one who is the bank. And so sometimes that's just helping them, owners, streamline that. And then we analyze, what are the strongest areas? What are the weakest? What's out of alignment? How does this month year to date match? And does it provide the information that you need? And this just takes time. You start where you start, and then you just get to refine as you start paying more and more attention. And how does it line up with industry standards? Are you doing your research to kind of take a look? And of course, every region is where they are, but there are some general rules that you can go back and just take a look and just use that with a grain of salt, and then you make a plan. and you incorporate these pieces around mission, strategic business plan, and any team member that it takes to be able to get that input in. And it's kind of interesting, just kind of blending the for-profit and the nonprofit kind of standpoint, which is the mission part of this, is really kind of thinking about like, what do we consider to be part of what we believe in as an organization and how we want to deliver service. And that, I guess, trying to think about that as when you are putting together a budget. So if your branding is and your mission is around like, I really want to deliver high quality, responsive support from your team, then really looking and saying, am I paying them? Am I incentivizing? Am I building in and taking care of and having my benefits in place to be able to retain that talent and to make sure that I've got those people, those right people in the room? So it's just, or if it has to do with materials or the grades or the level or responsiveness, any of that, it's just another lens to look at. And then making the plan, getting the historical information, details, and metrics, and using some standardized templates to get you started. And how do you break the information? And again, it's just taking a little bit of retreat time to say, is it about the size of job? Is it about the area of service? Is it have to do with the type of service? And anyway, programs like QuickBooks just have lots of versatility and being able to slice and dice the information and create that a new report. And it's all in nitty-gritty. It's all in the details. So proving everything in your budget, where does that number come from? How reliable can you be in that? And another little extra bit where, for somebody who's got contracts and they can say, okay, these are set contracts and these are locked in numbers. And this amount of my budget is aspirational, and then that kind of helps counter, like, okay, how much risk am I taking here? Is that aspirational income have corresponding expenses, or are the expenses baked in and the aspirational really isn't? I mean, it is aspirational, not locked in, but you really do need to make it in order to make the whole thing work. And any anticipated changes, leaving breadcrumbs, which is notes to yourself, a good frame of reference. You're going back saying, wait a minute, why is that number, or, oh, that's right, I did plan to do this and this once we went through the fiscal year, if we got us to a certain point. So it's just a way to refresh, especially if you've got other team members who are on there, so you don't invite them in to participate and then forget about that participation, if that makes sense. And then you poke holes in it, have somebody else help you poke holes in it to say, well, what about, and stepping back, and then you balance it. And so then managing the plan, doing monthly check-ins, regular check-ins, and setting the financials to the top of the agenda. That one is more about nonprofits, because they want to do the mission work and don't really want to talk about the financials. But if you're setting your monthly check-in, what else is your monthly check-in about? And it could be some of those other metrics. And then just a few reports that you could be using. You might have some additional supplementary reports that are specific to your company that can be used. And I think it's setting that standing time to stop, get them generated, and then, have your cup of coffee or tea and look at them and ask questions and dig in a little bit to see what it is. And and prioritizing that part of the work. Because no one's really bugging you to do it, and it's really only for you. So it's easy to, do the next work billable job. And then here is there action needed. If your year to date is not trending the way that you need it to trending, your revenue is trending down and your expenses are staying on track, well, something's going to give. Like Douglas was saying, by the time you get to the end of the year, and if you need to make those changes. Often we get folks who aren't paying attention maybe, and then they get to the end of the year, they say, okay, compile it, finish it up for us so that we can report, but it's just you're losing the entire year of being able to act and to refine what is happening. And right, what about cash? What about projections? And when you have less money and it is things aren't going the way, then it just of course takes more and more time to manage. And so assessing early. So additional reports to aid in the day-to-day operations. We want them to be informative, measured, actionable. And here are some different examples of what you can put together, again, refined for your business. And I saw this little graphic one time and I thought, oh yeah. So, you get the good reporting that's going into the accounting. You get to evaluate and analyze what's going into this data. Then you've got a plan to be able to, again, to feed into and then putting good systems in place to make sure that you've got good internal controls, good accuracy. You've got good confidence in the numbers that are going in so that you can rely on them to give you feedback about where you need to take your business. And so we've got ways to help remind you. We do newsletter, so you can sign up with us, and would love to hear from you at EDC, definitely. And for you, Hans, as well, if there's any kind of future topics that are of interest that may make sense for us to be able to do. And so some of our services that we talked about at the beginning. And I did also, well, let me pause there for a second, and then I've been talking and everyone's been quiet. Anything that you guys want to talk about in that way of what you're seeing, or what are helpful ways to support businesses in this part of the work?
I'd like to comment. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What you just outlined is the very first thing I do when I'm counseling a client in a turnaround or an expansion. Is the very first thing. The second thing I do after there's enough information is check to see if there's an embezzlement, because people with poor financial records are very vulnerable to that. When I was an SBDC counselor for 14 years, I would catch 2 embezzlers a year. Sometimes the accounting was perfect, but nobody had actually looked at it. But you could quite easily catch the embezzler just by looking at the QuickBooks and asking a few questions.
Exactly right. And that disconnect sometimes from that ownership of your books and really being able to see it. It's like, yeah, I get it. It may not be the thing that you want to do, and that you want to outsource some aspect of it so that you can be in a different part of the business. But and then too much control is given, like, oh, that person just has access, they transfer money, they do all of that. Oh, that person just signs the checks, and it's like, wait. I know when we're doing services, we say, we won't sign your checks. We won't do that for you. We need to have a protocol that goes in place so that you see the bills and you're giving an approval, so that you have that ownership in there, and that you are looking and getting the backup for what is happening in your account. Because right, for ease, it's like, oh, yes, again and again, like, how many trips to Costco does an organization need, and what is it exactly that you're buying in those different places? And and that comes from just making it easier for the owner, but you just create opportunity, and you want to be able to have that internal control there for sure.
Let me jump in just for a second, Tina, if I might.
Absolutely. Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to underscore what the gentleman just said. I've done the same thing, caught many embezzlers over the years. I wanted to also address the smaller versus larger in terms of doing budgeting. Over 40 years, I've pretty much focused on the small tradesman type size. I've done a lot of larger ones too, but I found the smaller ones the most rewarding, and they're the least likely to have done the budgeting process. The other pieces that I thought were really important, and I've used the budgeting as kind of the primary tool in my coaching over the years, but you've got to follow up with and you implied it, but I like using the words, a variance report on a monthly basis is really key. It not only helps you address those changes that you were talking about, so you can steer the ship or correct the ship steerage during the year, but it also helps you identify not only the embezzlement, but bookkeeping errors, and most important for the smaller businesses, it helps you teach them how to read financial statements, because very few small business owners understand how to read those financial reports.
Right. And how they match with one another, the P&L, or they just know the P&L, but not really how it works in relationship to the balance sheet, and having them schooled, right, becomes just a really valuable skill, so that they can analyze themselves too, and be able to track when there's something astray.
And helping them understand the difference between a profit and loss statement and a cash flow. Because cash flow is so critical to the small business guy.
Yeah, I've got two things to ask. One is how long or how many iterations does it usually take until the budget for an organization kind of stabilizes? I know when I did mine, it probably took me 3 years till I figured out really what I needed to track.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on where you're starting, what kind, like how good is the data that you start with, like has history been maintained in a way that's reliable? Or is it maybe a little bit, and so that first year you're just trying to find out what's real. And for me, it is like you just prove your numbers, and so you're going to know whether, regardless of what history is, it's all in the work that you do to kind of determine some of those fixed costs for sure, and then that variability is the part that is going to shift a little bit depending on what your history is. And the budget being just an ever-changing thing, your business is changing, and it depends on how static you are in the services that you're doing, the level of work that you're operating from, and so if you're kind of like on a track of saying, okay, I'm just trying to like do a little bit better than the year before, yeah, I would say in a few years you'd be all dialed in. But the reality is, oh, I got a big contract, and now all of a sudden I'm growing, and am I growing for the sake of growing? And so, everybody is on a different path and a goal set around why they're budgeting,
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I did, and this comes in very useful in a recession because everything's changing all the time financially. The cash flows I did with my clients got scarily accurate, over time, because I really understood it. But I always build in a toggle switch up on the top, and it's a percent, and it can change the sales by percent up or percent down. And my clients that did very well in the recession, when the recession hit, we toggled in a decrease of 20%, 30%, 40% in sales. Turned out it ended up being 40%, but they were prepared for that 2 months in advance because they had that projection in place. And it was very easy to, it's a lot of formula writing to make it just one toggle switch, but it's a very useful switch.
Yeah, no, that's great, especially going into what we're going into. And to do the what ifs, like, oh, if this happens, then am I going to have the reserves for that? Yeah. Hans?
Yeah, on that comment that was just made, I apologize. I don't know your name, sir.
Douglas?
With city.
Douglas Hammel.
Douglas. Yeah, this is Hans Frederickson. It's nice to meet you virtually. I'm interested by that concept, but I wonder how it played out in practice if you were to use that toggle to adjust your budget. There's a lot of budget items that are fixed and others that vary wildly, it seems to me, at least in my own business. And you have limited control over certain things like insurance and those sort of fixed employee benefits. And I'm just wondering how that played out in practice. If you could give a few kind of examples of how they used that feature.
Well, there are costs. First of all, in the body of the cash flow spreadsheet, you can link cost of goods sold, so you can toggle cost of goods sold up and down. So if that changes, you can automatically change it. Fixed costs are fixed costs. The question is can you get rid of any of them? So that toggle switch at the top, when you take out sales, you find out what your break even is, and your new break even after you're underwater. How much time is it going to take to dig out? Where are the new sales going to come from? But the fact that what it really does for you is that it gives you a head start on the industry. In this particular client I had, half of their industry went bankrupt in 2008, but they had a 2 months head start, and they scooped up all the sales. I mean, there were reduced sales for the whole industry, but they scooped up sales because other people were going bankrupt when they had a head start on doing their marketing. So yes, it's true that fixed costs, are rigid, and most fixed costs don't vary wildly. If they do, I mean, I'd have to look in that and see why is it. Cost of goods sold. If cost of goods sold varies wildly, I guess I'd isolate that as a percent in each month, so that you could toggle that up and down and see the effect, long term in subsequent months. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most part. Thank you.
Yeah. And Hans, in your situation, because I'm sure labor is a big part of the cost of goods sold, if you've got a team that you've got on board and you're playing with the sales that way, then that means that you would have a smaller team. And I guess just being aware of that component that says, oh, and then what is the corresponding benefit, just depending on how that's set up as cost of goods sold. I suppose you could have the benefits attached up at the cost of goods sold for those individuals to get you a clear picture.
One of the discussions, or I guess I've had several discussions recently with business owners on the idea of they're so involved in in their day-to-day running of the business that they never get to work on the business.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really thought of the budgeting, but this is a good first step to start doing that strategic thinking and not get caught up in the day-to-day activities. Have you found that to be the case?
Oh, yeah. Well, I live that for sure. That's always the constant challenge, and setting aside specific time that says, okay, on this day of the week, this is when I'm actually blocking out time for me to do this part of it, and blocking out time to pay attention to marketing, even if things are outsourced. Then how am I doing that? And getting always surprising to me, of course, because you get used to delivering and doing a certain amount of work that your replacement is not as efficient, and so building in some of that relief for you as a business owner that says, hey, part of my job is just running this, and I can't let it just run unattended. So that's how I've managed it, blocked specific time in my work schedule to say this is what it's dedicated for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
But-
Douglas.
But I was just going to say, just follow up, but working on the budget it just forces you to think about those things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Douglas?
Douglas.
Yeah, there's another spreadsheet I always try to do with my clients, and that's an average month break-even chart, but at various levels of sales. So you might have one where there's a sales level with its cost of goods sold and its expenses, and it's not profitable. Then at another level of expansion, higher sales, it is profitable. Then at another level of expansion, it's unprofitable again because you've had a jump in fixed costs perhaps. And so if you map that out at various levels of expansion, and suddenly you're in a crisis, or you have a preview of the crisis coming because of the toggle switch on the sales, you can immediately look at your break even at various levels of expansion and choose the one that fits the situation. And you can also pre-plan what you're going to shed, which employees, what equipment, new location. So you can do pre-planning for various levels of expansion and be way ahead of people who are going to wait 6 months and almost go bankrupt before they can react to a recession.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So I don't know. We're big fans and big believers of the process for all of the reasons. And I think that underscore piece that you were just saying, Jay, that says, it's also your job to run your business. And are you giving, how much of that time are you really giving to your business? Is that a quarter time? Are you a quarter time business owner? Not a business owner, but like CEO, I guess. Are you a part-time CEO? And then what are the ways that you can have more time to do that? And part of that is outsourcing and figuring out, what do you do best? And what can you outsource for efficiency, and or even just to get it off your plate and still get it done and have confidence, because there's only so many hours in a day. And just really being truthful with yourself around where your skills are and aren't. And then just augment, kind of pick and choose what is additive, so that you can be the most efficient and lean way to approach a particular project. I want to take a few minutes and just talk about the 401k. So the 401k, it was a little project for us as a business. We said, hey, we want to incorporate this. And I've worked with a lot of businesses that end up just doing simples. And so I looked at that and I thought, okay, well, can we do something better than a simple, and maximize, just as a business owner, how do I maximize my 401k contributions, and anybody else who wants to do that if that's a vehicle. So we started looking into it. And so we say, okay, IRAs are one avenue that folks use, but you get capped out pretty fast. And 401ks. And we started to look at those and went to some different providers that different clients were using as well for recommendations. And we kind of went through and said, yeah, so this is so expensive. Why is it so expensive? It's just a small, it's a small plan. How can I get something that's a little bit more economical? And so through that research and about a year of kind of figuring out and doing research and getting the right partners together, we ended up building our own 401k plan. And underneath that are individual businesses that can have their own plan with their own rules and their own eligibility that fall under that. And so we picked up that structure, and I was doing the math a little bit right before. It was about a fifth of the price than what I was finding out. And I thought, okay, well, that is significant, and that would make it a lot more accessible for business owners to say yes to a 401k plan, not just for themselves, but for the employees, because, you're trying to save money, you're trying to do good for employees, but does it have to cost an arm and a leg? So I'm gonna just share real quick how to get that information. I am on our website on clarityei.com under what we do. There's a 401k tab and talks a little bit about what this employer exchange is. And we just have you schedule a meeting, and then you can talk with Livia, who's on our team, and can ask a little bit about it and introduce you to our contact and Liz Newport, and then they can tell you a little bit more about it and provide whatever comparisons that you might need if you've got an existing plan, or get more information that way, and then can talk all about what the benefits are. Yeah, so if there's any questions on this, I'm happy to answer whatever I can. And usually it's a one-on-one conversation just to kind of get an idea. Is this a match for you? Or is it something for the future?
Tina, in the questions you might have with a client interested in 401k retirement plans, what would the structure of that conversation be when you're trying to get information to determine what program might be best?
So usually it's to gather some initial information, whether they have an existing plan or not, how many employees, and just try to gather as much information, because sometimes it's a brand new startup and there's no money that's transferring over from another plan. And so it's just gathering that information, and then we take that to our contacts, the team that we've got between Transamerica and Liz, and then they kind of put together a plan. The plan costs, if I'm just off the top of my head, I think are like $1,200 annually, and there may be like a $500 setup in the first year, and then Clarity has an access fee of $500 annually. So the plans that I was looking at were somewhere in the $6,000 to $8,000 range, and that was every year, and with a lot of extra hoops. And this has been a great thing for us to get implemented quickly, and then we've been just telling our clients about it, and it's been a nice accessible shift for them to be able to say, great, same benefit, I get the thing that I'm looking for, and I don't have as high of a fee for the management of it.
Okay, so it's bundled with a bunch of other local folks then?
Liz operates actually out of the East Coast, and Transamerica. Yeah, the group, we ended up finding them because we were working with a maritime group and setting up a plan, and it kind of catapulted from a particular insurance agent who was specialized in maritime, and they happened to be on the East Coast, and so then that's how the relationship ended up going. But I wasn't able to find anything around here that was comparable. Hans, you've got a hand up?
Yeah, I started looking seriously at adding moving from a simple to a 401k last year. And my personal investment philosophy is to do, low fee index investing for the most part. We have a simple with Vanguard. When I started adding up the costs for all the fees that these 401k providers were offering, I backed off, because it just seemed like, for the style of investing that I personally prefer, and that I don't advocate really to our employees, but I hope that they adopt similar philosophy so they can be as successful as possible. It just seemed like tacking on not just the annual fees for administration, but also these +4% management fees was going to actually reduce their returns in the long run. I'm of course attracted to the 401k as an owner because the contribution limits are higher, but I also care a lot about the employees and the performance of their portfolios. And I wondered, is the fee structure similar in that the fees that you described, the administration fees, and then there's an additional fee from like a brokerage or a management company that the employees work with to make their investment decisions?
So I think getting into the nuts and bolts with that is going to be a conversation with Livia and Liz to get into that piece. I think when I was looking at them, I was looking at while there were low cost or no cost to the employer in the simple arrangement, the employees were carrying the burden of that cost. And so with the 401k being attractive from a business owner standpoint, that I can have higher contributions, and then I was taking some of that burden off of them in the fees that they're charging us. So that was the strategy there. Just trying to get them lower fees and higher returns, lower fees, whether depending on whatever they choose for higher returns. But the specifics, if you've got kind of fresh research and you've got some good information on that and talking particulars, I would connect you with Liz so that she can be specific.
Okay.
Yeah. And and she has been a really valuable partner in just being plain about how do you do what you do? How do you set up the 401k to plan to fit you and to benefit you as a business owner, certainly in the most attractive way, and still be a benefit to your employees, and just being strategic about how you do that, so that you as the owner are getting the maximum benefit that you can. And part of that is plan design,
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want me to set up a chat?
Yeah, I think, I've got some time this year, but right now I'm in the middle of a few very time consuming things, but I'd definitely be interested in looking at it in the next month or two.
Okay.
Well,
If you want,
super.
if you don't mind popping your email address in the chat, and I'll scoop it from there and get you connected.
Sure.
Well, any last words of wisdom?
No, it's just thanks, Hans. It's just a great thing that you guys are there in force doing what you're doing. I know the businesses in this community just definitely need support, and it's hard to prioritize that, sometimes focused on themselves as a business. I was going to scoop up his email before it went away. So just glad that you're here to provide that resource. And now certainly with Douglas being on board to, just be in the trenches there. And I know just Clarity as an organization has, there's overlap in some of the areas when people come to us, and being able to say, well, EDC does this also, or EDC does this other part. We want to be good partners in the community, and also to let people know what are services that are free to them potentially. And sometimes it still ends up, oh, well, they end up working with us because there's a limit, to what you can do on that end before you start doing the work for them. But we want them to know what's available, and get them engaged and involved in their businesses so that they can have them be sustainable. It's heartbreaking to see businesses start with all the energy and effort and heart and soul that goes into it, and then just, maybe they needed another 18 months of cash flow that they didn't know, and then it all goes for naught. So just trying to keep them vibrant and keep our community vibrant too.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad that you're also here in the community helping people out. And just for the listeners, the distinction that we're making is that the EDC is largely publicly funded and we can offer no-cost services, but we're more like coaches. We're not going to do your work for you, but we can help you learn, help you think about it, and help you figure out how, what place to get started and kind of coach you through a process. But if you really want to outsource stuff, if you really don't like doing your accounting or bookkeeping, or if you want somebody to sit down with you and really analyze your financials with you for a fee, then Clarity might be a good place to go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Nice to see some faces and get to talk about budgets, which could be more exciting on a January sunny day.
All right. Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for coming, everyone.